Welcome to Career Tools. Today we continue our conversation about bad boss number 1, the angry and demeaning boss. If you haven't listened to parts 1 and 2, well, you may want to go and listen to those first. Assuming you have, here we go. Okay, so we can't share our frustrations with our boss, with our peers. We can't share with HR. We can't share with our boss's boss. So surely I get to go share with my spouse.
Yes, you do.
Finally.
Yes, you do. And in fact, the moment Manager Tools or Career Tools says, don't talk about this with your spouse, is the moment we get some angry emails, surely, because that's not our expertise. But we are going to give folks a safety valve. We do recommend you share with your spouse. When I've recommended this before, many people have sent emails or called and said, I really appreciate that. I needed somebody to talk to. And the spouse was great. Tell your spouse what happened, what you did. Tell them how you feel about it. They're going to know something's up. Oh, there's some men out there who think, no, she doesn't know. Well, yeah, she does. Don't try to hide it. Boss power absolutely reaches right into our homes. That's one of the reasons Manager Tools exists, actually, is because we want to help your directs' home lives as well, but we want you to be a professional and effective manager, and that improves everybody's lot. So go home. It's okay. Vent a little bit. If we may, we're gonna acknowledge that there are subtle gender differences between men and women and say this. For men, when your wife vents, when your professional spouse comes home and she has a job that's somewhat like yours in some way, or she works at a company just like you do, and it's a two-income family. When your wife vents, gentlemen, do not try to solve her problem. This is a typical male response, and it's not what most women want from their spouse. It may be what they want from a coworker. And you're not going to be good at it anyway because you're not there and all the subtleties won't get translated to you. So just be quiet and listen. It's likely she wants to share. Let her. Don't protect her. By protecting, I mean trying to solve her problem. Let her vent. Tell her that you understand that must be terrible, and I'm sure she feels bad, and ask her to share more how she feels. And say, I'm thinking about you. I'm praying for you. I love you. I hope things work out. Let me know how I can help. And I bet you when you say, let me know how I can help, she's going to say, well, you just did. You just listened. And what I wanted for you to listen.
Yeah. Now, a couple caveats here I think we need to mention. And the first is, don't do this at work, folks. Don't text them. Don't email them or even call them.
Right.
I hate to break it to you folks, but that stuff gets tracked or overheard or something. You just can't be sure what's going to happen or how that information might be used. So just don't do it.
Right.
So that's why our recommendation is very specific. Go home and vent a bit. Don't do it at work.
Yeah, we wrote that. It's there for a reason. Go home and vent. Not vent, but go home and vent. Yeah. So the second of 3 caveats is, please, folks, don't seriously consider any spousal advice regarding your demeaning and angry boss. Okay? Look, your wife may be a sharp senior exec. Great. But she probably doesn't understand all the details. You're not a perfect vessel for relating what actually happened. You're going to describe it through your emotional haze and your anger at your boss, and that's going to color her ability to accurately give you advice and recommendations. By the same token, on the other side, your husband may be a very sharp HR person, but again, he doesn't know the details. And the culture is probably different where they work. And the role power is different where they work. And they don't have the subtle relationship details that you have with your boss. Spouses do not give good advice. And look, let me just say something else. Your spouse sees you through a lens that makes their recommendations fraught with difficulty. It's frustrating, but I hear this all the time. And my wife says, or my husband says, I'm like, oh my God, no, don't do that. Don't do that. We only have to give you one example to prove it. And that is the old phrase, honey, I'll tell you what to do. You just walk right in there tomorrow and you tell him da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Nobody doesn't know what that means, right? Which is, oh, is that not an accident waiting to happen? That spousal support and love and lack of knowledge about your details and totally taking your side rather than seeing it as a fairly complex professional dance. So
exactly. And we have a third caveat we got to mention as well, is that do this privately and only with your spouse. Don't take anything we've said here suggest that we mean for you to leave the office and share with your friends. And secondly, make sure you tell your spouse this. No one but us do we talk about this to. You really, maybe not, but a lot of folks are sometimes surprised at how small the world is. There are no secrets.
Yeah, and we had a note earlier about at the men. We suggested to if your female spouse comes home and complains about an angry and demeaning boss, guys, you need to just listen. Well, there's a counterpoint to that, and for those of you female spouses, for the women who are listening, whose husband comes home and brings painful stories about the angry, demeaning boss, it is not appropriate for you to share your husband's difficulties with his boss with your close friends, because women are different than men, quote unquote, and we share everything. That's every bit as bad as your husband trying to solve problems for you when you really don't want him to solve your problems. And frankly, he doesn't know the details enough to solve them anyway. No sharing means no sharing because, again, as Mike said, the world is smaller than you think. There are no secrets. It's a horseman's law. And the more people who know that don't share the special bond that a husband and wife do, the more likely you are to have it get back to somebody. And the really clever, angry, and demeaning boss will get rid of you, and you'll never know that somebody else let him or her know what was going on.
Yes, exactly. And again, I've seen that too many times.
Yeah. Yep. And people think, no, it's a big, gosh, we're friends. We live up here in Greenwich, but really the job is over there and it's nothing. And oh my gosh, you'd be amazed. There are movies made about that, right? Where randomness brings people together and you see it unfolding in real time and you just feel sad for the person who you know is going to be the victim of an accident.
Yeah. And you don't want all that randomness to all come together over your career. That's not a good place to be.
Randomness and your career generally don't go together.
So our next point is, it should go without saying, but it obviously doesn't, which is get your resume ready.
Yeah, it should go without saying, but we're still getting resumes that are 6 pages long who people say, yeah, I read your guidance and I did my best and now I'd like you to turn it into a good resume. 6 pages long. So we don't mind being the old joke of Captain Obvious here. If you work for an angry and demeaning boss, as soon as you realize it's not just a passing moment of frustration that he's having, dust off that resume, sit down that night or over the next weekend and get it updated. And look, if you haven't heard our discussions about resumes, we can just share now that we consider your resume to be your primary career management document. It's not just yet another task that has to be done to get me a new job. We still get resumes with spelling errors and obvious mistakes from professionals with multiple degrees. We recommend you keep it current with a half-hour review of your work and results each quarter. Half an hour a quarter. That is, 2 hours a year? Not too much to ask when you work for a boss who could have had a bad day the same time you do and fire you without much effort and not even mention it to their spouse when they go home. You don't want to be scrambling, particularly when your spouse is stunned and you're angry. That's the recipe for an unsuccessful resume, and an unsuccessful resume tends to increase the length of time of a job search, which is not a good plan.
And we also recommend that you keep a Delta file, which is kind of interesting because I don't think we've ever shared this career tool, have we?
No, but you and I have talked about it before, right? I mean, right? You just keep look, it's really simple. We always recommend it because we think this is a way to sort of codify one's learning about when we work for a boss, the things that we like and don't like, we write them down because we want to model the good things and avoid the bad things. But look, we recommend, it's pretty simple. You keep a list of the stuff that this boss has done and does to you. If it's a rude or unprofessional email or an exchange that made you feel like crap, write it down and store it. You can copy and paste emails into another email and send it to your private and personal email account at home, not your work account. Don't keep these in your work email. If you're forwarding a mail or capturing what happened in a mail, don't embellish while you're at work. At work, all you do is capture what happened. And then when you get home, then you turn it into the Delta file by adding comments and so on. And I think we made it pretty clear that we call it the Delta file for a reason. It's not intended to be documentation in the event you need something like documentation with this angry boss you're working for.
To be clear, though, you could use it for that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but we call it because the intent of it is to use it for our own purpose to make ourselves better managers. At some point in the future, we want to be reminded of the things that were done to us that we found unprofessional or ineffective. And too often, if we're a competent person and we're doing well, we tend to forget those things and we tend to believe that we overcame them, and then we forget what was done to us. We just remember that we overcame it. Well, you can't change things that you overcame. You can only change things that other people did that you didn't like, and you need to remember those things. We have the file so that we won't perpetrate these stupid acts or clumsy acts or angry acts on other people. So we can essentially change how people are managed. And we call it the Delta file, of course, because Delta is traditionally the mathematical symbol for change.
There you go. Now, we ought to make a special note about ethical issues because they're different. Some angry bosses cross the line and their anger causes them to behave unethically. They speak angrily about a piece of work, then they move to a personal attack, and then finally they do something that crosses the line and they criticize someone's gender or their nationality or their ethnicity or their marital status.
Right.
You name it.
Yeah.
If you feel your boss, angry or otherwise, it really doesn't matter, has engaged in some kind of unethical behavior, then you have an obligation to report it.
Right.
There's no honor code in business today. You don't have to report any ethical violation on pain of firing. If you're a professional, there's still the obligation. There's just no clear enforcement of it. If something has happened and you fear an ethical breach, we recommend that you ignore our guidance about the angry part of your boss. Instead, just focus on the obligation you have to report ethical breaches.
And we've got future casts on ethical dilemmas planned. We don't have time to cover it here fully, right? But there is a critical point here, and I'll try to make it as short as possible. We've talked above about the boss who's attacking us, right? There's a work critique, and then there's a personal attack. You're an idiot. This work is crap. You're an idiot. And then there's an attack on someone's unalterable characteristics or on their personal choices. It is only the third part of that process that makes an attack unethical.
Wow. Yeah. I bet you there's far too many managers out there who, inexperienced managers particularly, who mistakenly believe that it's the second step, right? That
Right.
moving into the personal attack, that's really qualifies it as being unethical, but it's not.
It's not. Yeah.
I mean, just because you got your feelings hurt doesn't mean you have an ethical complaint against your boss that you're then obligated to report.
Yeah.
That's not the issue.
Yeah. If you're in doubt, it's not an ethical complaint. And all the guidance that we have in this cast about angry bosses, if that's the issue, still stands. And I'll tell you something. The millennial generation, the trophy generation, as the book talks about, the trophy kids, particularly dangerous relative to this because there has been wide reporting about how the millennial generation was raised. If you're under the age of, say, 26, I think, I could be wrong. This is 2009. If you're under the age of 26, I don't know the exact age breaks, but if you feel like there's been an ethical breach, we encourage you to think again because it's more likely that you would think that an ethical breach happened in step 2 when somebody attacked you personally and called you an idiot. Look, it's not fun. We're not saying your boss is a saint and should be forgiven for calling you an idiot, but calling you an idiot is not an ethical breach. It's only an ethical breach when they start attacking personal characteristics that are related to gender and or that they attack your ethnicity or choices you're making in your personal life and so on. So, yeah, if you're in doubt, assume it's not an ethical complaint. Generally, an ethical complaint is something that's so egregious that goes beyond the pale. And if you're in doubt, it's probably not that.
Good. And I think that about concludes our first point, which is the coping part of it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Coping, again, right? It's first because it's most important. If you act rashly or you reach out inappropriately to whomever other than your spouse, if you try to keep it from your spouse, if you aren't ready with your resume, the end result of working for an angry boss, a demeaning boss, is not going to be good, or you're going to be less effective, and we want you to be effective, right? By just doing these small things, and they're small. Each one of them is small. You can do each one of them in their own time. Basically, what happens is you live to fight another day. I think we talked about it earlier, right? You maintain control. We get to maintain control of our own careers, as opposed to ceding, maybe not the control, but at least the driving of the decision to someone who, frankly, we don't respect. I think we said it earlier. Long after the fleeting joy of telling your boss to go, say, jump in a lake,
Yeah.
long after that joy wears off, you'll be looking for a job on short notice without as much support as you could have had from the place you're leaving. And I want to touch on this. These coping skills really make a difference when you do decide to leave, because you're not perceived as a hothead. You're not perceived by everyone else around you as someone who's making a rash decision. The fact that you know you're not making a rash decision is important. But when others have seen you cope for months and months and months, and perhaps even a year or two, and they've seen you take it, and HR has watched you work for an angry boss but has not done anything about it, you will get more credibility. You will be more respected. You'll have people who are directors of yours want to follow you because you set a standard that says, if he or she behaves that way, that's them, but it's not me. And you'll get an additional benefit out of the coping if you get promoted from working for this boss, or if you decide to leave the company, or if you go somewhere else. Coping actually delivers a delayed benefit when you actually no longer work for this company. The respect that others have for you goes way, 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 way up. And you don't get to the other two steps, performing or deciding, unless you handle the coping well.
Well, that's it for this week, everyone. Hey, if you're new to Career Tools and you haven't been to the Manager Tools website, you might want to check it out. Between Manager Tools and Career Tools, we have over 200 podcasts out there on an incredible variety of topics. www.managertools.com. Hope to see you there. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week.